Hello guys, welcome back. Today we are going to be making meat pie. Some people call it beef patties. So this meat pie is a very buttery and flaky recipe. Something my clients also enjoy a lot, and I do have other requests for this a lot as I cater um, as a side hustle. So let's get right into the process. So in the bowl here, I have 4 cups of flour, 2.5 cups of butter, a cup of milk sitting at the side. In the flour, I have a teaspoon of baking powder. So we are going to rub the butter into the flour. As you can see, that's a lot of butter. So this process takes about 3 to 4 minutes. So we are all done with the rubbing, and that's what it should look like. If it doesn't look like that, it means it's not rich enough. So I'm going to make a well in the middle and pour in the cup of milk. That is very cold milk. The reason why we want to use very cold milk is to be able to hold the butter and the flour together. So keeping it cold keeps it together. So as you mix it, this is the consistency you are looking for. It shouldn't be too strong or too soft, but since you're going to probably be making this for the first time, if it's too strong, let's say you miscalculated something, you can add in a little bit of cold water or cold milk. If it's too soft, you can add in a little bit of flour. So we are done with the mixing. I'm gonna let it rest in the fridge for about 20 to 30 minutes. So we are getting into the meat filling process right now. Here's me dicing some onions. So I like my onions finely diced. I really don't like blending the onions that I use in meat pies. I like the onion finely diced so it can disintegrate into the meat, so it's not very obvious. So it's time to start the process. I am going to heat up my pan to about 350 degrees, 300 to 350. That's like 2 tablespoons of olive oil. You can use whatever oil you have available at home, and you don't want the heat to be so hot or to be high. Don't put it on high heat, maybe medium heat works better. And we just let the onions cook a little bit. We just added in a little bit of blended garlic, ginger, and celery. That's about 2 teaspoons. about half a teaspoon of black pepper. By the way, my black pepper is finely grounded, and you can do the coarse. I added a little bit of curry powder. That's about half a teaspoon. You don't want to make the flavor too strong. Here we are adding our beef into the seasoned onions. So I'm adding some beef cubes to make it tasty. You can add whatever, maybe the powder, the knorr powder, beef or chicken would also work the same, but in this recipe I'm adding beef cubes. It doesn't matter what beef cubes you have, any would work. So I'm going to let it, I added a pinch of salt as well. So I'm going to let it cook for a little bit so the juice from the meat can seep out. So here we have the juice. There's a little bit of juice in there. I'm adding in a tablespoon of cornstarch. That's to give it some fullness and thickness. And it's getting a little bit dry. So in this case, I'll add a little bit of water to loosen things up. You don't want your meat pie dry because you want it to be moist after it's been baked. So that's a perfect consistency right there. It's not too dry, it's not too wet, and the cornstarch would help you achieve this consistency. We'll let it cool down for a little bit, and then we get right into the rolling of the meat pie. I usually use my kitchen island when I work with dough. It's very convenient for me. I just clean it up and get right into work. Sometimes I'll also use a pastry board, but that's mostly when I do breads. But for this recipe, I'm using the kitchen island, and I know most of you at home have kitchen islands. As long as it's granite top, it will work perfectly. So I have some egg sitting in a bowl with a brush on the side. That's to help me bind my edges when we get to that process. And I also have a little bit of flour sitting in a cup. That's just to dry out the surface so it doesn't stick. But with the amount of butter that we have in the dough, most of the times it doesn't stick. But if it does, if yours stick, flour would work. So I'm going to cut out the sizes that I want for the meat pie, and that's kind of like a cutter. I have different sizes of this cutter. It depends on what the client wants or the size that I feel like making on a given day. And I like my sizes very consistent, and as you can see, the dough, it's not thick, it's very thin, and with that thinness, the crust is very flaky at the same time. So we use the egg to rub the sides of the already cut dough so it can be able to bind properly. So here is when I bring in my fork to press down the edges so it can bind properly. So you don't need complicated kitchen equipment or utensils to be able to make meat pie at home. Even sometimes plastic bowls with sharp edges can also act as cutters if you don't have like a cutter like the one I have right there. And you see, it's very simple kitchen utensils and tools would also achieve the process. So I am using a non-stick baking pan. If you don't have a non-stick baking pan, you can sprinkle a little bit of flour on your pan so it doesn't stick, or you can also use parchment paper. But because this baking pan is non-stick, I'm placing my pies directly on to the pan. So now it's time to egg wash the meat patties. I am poking some holes on top of the meat pies so that the heat that builds in it in the baking process can be released so it doesn't break open. So we'll slowly egg wash everything, and that would give the meat pie a very nice glaze at the end of the baking process. And at this point, I have preheated my oven to over 300 degrees, and the pies will bake in the oven for about 25 minutes. So our pies had been in the oven for 25 minutes. They are now out and ready to be served. Look at the color, golden brown, thin crust, very flaky at the same time. So if you have watched my channel up to this moment, it means you did enjoy it. I am trying to grow my channel, guys. It's a newly created channel. I have a lot of content in place. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share.